the Impaler is essentially the embodiment of what people are talking about when they say something like Elden Ring is the culmination of everything From Software has learned from their previous games, and stands out as pretty much the pinnacle of this game's boss design. He incorporates the patient and disciplined combat of the Souls series, while also having the flair and spectacle and overall art direction, which has a level of quality on par with Dark Souls 3. His moveset both has some of the speed and detail-focused intricacy of a game like Sekiro, while also allowing for the more risk-reward style of gameplay seen in a game like Bloodborne, where frenetic aggression is equally able to be rewarded and punished depending on how well you know the fight. Seeing as he is not only such a well-designed boss, but one of my personal favorites, I wanted to kind of dissect this enemy on a more thorough scale and maybe offer some advice to people that are either struggling to beat him or want to come back and try the boss in a different way. So I have done 5 separate playthroughs, each with easily accessible DLC weapons, which you will see the names of popping up on screen. If you're curious, go find these for yourself. We'll be giving more broad and general advice regarding playstyles rather than the specific builds or weapons.
A curse upon thee.
But please leave me a comment if you, have any questions about the build or want to talk shop. I'd be happy to chat with you. So as you can see here, I've got a blood-infused milady, which is a pretty great option you can get right before this. Even not having a lot of levels in Arcane and just like 45 bleed on a random weapon like the Starline Sword, which I just showed off, is still going to put in a lot of work in this fight because Messmer is very susceptible to status effects. I would say in general, a lot of his weaknesses and kind of the strategy to approaching this boss fight parallels Malenia, with the key exception being, obviously he's not as resistant to something like Rod, but he is much more resistant to fire, which Malenia is pretty weak to. Which is why, with maybe the exception of Morgoth's Cursed Sword, I would kind of recommend steering clear of Blood Flame, both spells and weapons, as a lot of your damage is just going to completely drop off if that's all you have. I mean, sure, go ahead and use it. The status will still be very useful, but you're going to get a lot more mileage out of something like an Occult Nagakiba than you would Rivers of Blood or the Pole Blade or something. Much like Malenia, Messmer is also very easy to stance break, especially if you're consistently punishing your openings. He is a very relentless kind of boss, so as long as you are avoiding everything, it's very easy to build up stance, but once you are in kind of a weak state and you need to back off and heal, that's where Messmer's kit really shines, as he is excellent at punishing panic rolls. And to use fighting game terms, he has a very strong advantage state. It's kind of like a rushdown character, meaning if you're avoiding everything and you're staying close to him, he will give you very long opportunities to punish, but the second where your game plan starts falling apart, you will not get a moment to breathe, and you need to be near perfect to recover from that. In addition to having something that can build up stance damage relatively consistently, I also would definitely recommend Ashes of War that are good at closing the distance, as a lot of his long openings can catch you out of position, and if you aren't close enough to him to punish, you might end up in a situation where you're trying to rush and get that extra hit in, and all of a sudden you get caught with something and you're unprepared and everything starts unraveling. So stuff like Wing Stance on the Milady, or the Ash of War on Morgoth's Cursed Sword, or the Falx, for example, are really useful as far as just maximizing the amount of time you get to wail on him. Very similarly, we're also looking at another weapon that does deal some bleed damage, that being the Beast Claws, and these are kind of emblematic of a more strength or quality approach that you might take to this boss. Obviously, the Beast Claws are not really as powerful as the family of normal claws or the Starfist, for example. However, they do offer a very aggressive moveset that does very consistently allow you to close the distance and stack hits on an opponent. The biggest drawback to these weapons and this playstyle in general, if you're going with strength, is that, a lot of your animations aren't exactly the fastest. You don't have the ability to sort of dance in and out of movesets like you would if you were using, a katana or backhand blades or something. And even though the individual hits on something like the Beast Claws are very fast, a lot of the animations in total are very long and involve a lot of hits. So one thing that I absolutely think is necessary for this kind of aggressive strength or quality playstyle is lots of poise and to maximize your defense. Those damage negation talismans, specifically the Flame Drake one, is going to be paramount for playing kind of as a tank. And in addition to that, you are going to really want to put on some armor with some poise so that the actually high damage dealing portion of your attacks does not consistently get interrupted. Fire Prelate set, the Black Jail Knight, either of them work great, but it's kind of important if you are going to play in this way. It's also important to keep in mind that, especially in the second phase, he will deal hefty amounts of physical damage as well as fire. So not only do you need to just be able to tank things with poise, but you need to be able to survive them. So if you are using something that is a lot slower than a greatsword, you need to be really careful and memorize, well, which attacks you can safely punish and which ones you can, which may be universal for this type of game, but I think it's extra important here because once Messmer starts stacking hits on you and gets you backing off, you're kind of screwed. Now, many of these weapons and kind of playstyles I've discussed so far do incorporate some use of dexterity, and part of the reason for that is just, well, if you're doing pure int or pure strength, by the time you get to the TLC, you're probably going to want to start reallocating some of those damage stats somewhere else, and well, dex combos well with a lot of things, but in particular, I think this stat and this kind of fast-paced playstyle is going to work really well against Messmer, just given the type of enemy he is. Which is why stuff like the Falx, the double curve sword kind of moveset, or even curve greatsword, anything that gives you a lot of, ability to deal stance damage and keep pressure on them with jump attacks and running attacks and Ashes of War that close a lot of distance, is going to be absolutely fantastic for this fight. The Falx are obviously thematically connected to Messmer. The name of the skill is Revenger's Blade, which of course is specifically trying to take revenge on Messmer. And the gap closing ability that Ash of War has is going to offer you a ton of opportunities that other builds and even other weapons might just not be able to pull off. Strength builds are a lot more about kind of learning when you can and can't attack, what is safe and what isn't, and where you should hit trade, whereas dex builds are much more focused on kind of how much can I get away with, how many hits can I stack on top of each other, how aggressively can I play for bleed or stance break or whatever it is your build centers around. And taking this approach to Messmer is kind of a double-edged sword because you really need to know when you're close to getting him to bleed or frost or, get stance broken, because if you don't and you end up just being greedy, you will get punished hard. Because like I said, once Messmer's kit gets rolling, he can just stack attacks that do tons of damage and that you are going to have a lot of trouble getting away from because of your positioning, because you were greedy.
Ah, there's a little snake in the grass.
Yes, brother. Who cares? Today. Smash.
You need to know when it's safe to actually go for a killing blow and when you're just going to mess up an otherwise good run. Messmer and his attack timing takes a lot of time to learn, but once you get it down, it's very difficult to forget. And this is kind of, one of my favorite things about this boss, which is just how well his design and his nature as a character ties into his moveset. Messmer's nature is kind of dual in the sense that he is both fiery and serpentine, and both of these things can be seen throughout both phases of his fight. Both will kind of hiss at you before exploding or biting or whatever it is. Both have a fear-inducing, almost like false telegraph, much like a rattlesnake. It's trying to get its prey to make the wrong move before it strikes. And if you fall for this, you will get your ass ate. There is no other way to put it. Even once you have those timings down, this can definitely play mind games with you when you're in a position where you really need to avoid something, and you're aware of that fact. And all of a sudden, your judgment gets a little cloudy and panicky as he's about to attack, and you roll too early. Mastery is really the name of the game here with Messmer, which is why I personally think he's just such a fucking well-designed boss. But while it's important to remember to respect these moves as dangerous and very able to kill you, it's also important to remember that, Messmer, kind of like Malenia, who's got a ton of destructive potential, he's super dangerous, however, he himself is not invincible, and you can exploit that fact. I'm personally a big believer that, using overpowered, quote-unquote, or just fun builds to try to make your characters as expressive or powerful or fun to play as possible is much more important than some ugly Redditor's idea of what Michael Zaki originally intended when he farted demon souls from his pristine golden ass or something. A lot of the options I've discussed here are quote-unquote meta picks, and they're going to be very strong against Messmer, but it's important to remember that really anything works outside of a few things that he's very resistant to, like fire, or if you're using something that can't really stance break in, you're going to have a much harder time. If you have something that is at least average level of lethality, that you can exploit his nature as a glass cannon. Being not just familiar with range and timing, but also how long it takes for you to break stance or proc status, as well as specific combos of moves you can use in quick succession to get a stance break, for example, will be the difference between victory and defeat, because although Messmer is a very challenging foe, he is a fair one, and once you've learned to fight well and have a setup that is able to deal consistent damage to him no matter what method you use, whether it's magic damage, whether it's weapon buffs on a dex weapon, whatever it is, if you are able to find something that hurts him and do it consistently, you're going to win, which is true of every single boss fight. However, with Messmer, I think it really stands out as more important, as especially in phase 2, he will just start compiling moves that you can't really punish but are very dangerous one after another, especially that big explosion that he has. So you need to be very wary of these things, you need to be prepared for these things, and in an ideal world, you want to be in a position where you're kicking his ass long before he has a chance to use these things back to back or over and over again, or once you're already low health and the flasks are out of position. So yeah, that's a Graceless meta slut's guide to beating Messmer the Impaler, one of my favorite bosses from Elden Ring, if not just my favorite boss from Elden Ring, or maybe Souls in general. That might be kind of glazed, but I don't know, what can I say? I love me some 18 inches of Messmer. If you made it this far into the video, I very much appreciate your viewership, and I hope at least one of these tips or things was interesting or new to you, and if you enjoyed, feel free to like and hit subscribe, or leave me a comment if you think I suck or want to talk about builds, because well, I'm a giant nerd. So yeah, anyway, with that, happy Halloween. Those stripped of the grace of gold will all meet death, and yeah, have a nice day. Catch you later.